very interesting climax events in the autumn.
Yeah, there's a lot of build-up, a lot of talk out there in the media coming up of end of August, beginning of October, and such.
Yeah, it's very difficult to get timing on anything, but it looks to me like we have several things working simultaneously toward, I don't want to say crash or breakdown, but I will say just widening cracks and falling platforms and erosion of alliances. Like right now, I think there's a big break going on between the United States and Germany. I think there's some very big problems going on with respect to Saudi Arabia and the rest of the world. Their only friend now is the United States, and what they have in common is war crimes.
Yeah.
There's a break actually maybe in progress between the United States and Britain. Britain wants its financial connections with the Chinese to be developed now that they're beyond the British exit, the Brexit. So there's so many things going on. And I have a little saying, Kai, and I think it applies very well for the last 3 or 4 years, maybe the last 10 years. Everything the United States government touches with respect to foreign policy turns to rubble and shit.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Everything that we have touched, we tried the hegemon hand, and it backfires. We're putting we put a lot of pressure on Turkey. We tried to execute a coup d'état. It failed, and now they're pretty much with one foot solidly in the Russian camp, and the second foot is in progress. We tried pressuring Iran, and that all backfired. The Iran nuclear talks, in my opinion, was a surrender talk. And the U.S. is now in the process of trying to violate the terms of the agreement. The U.S. has not really honored any of its treaties in the last several decades. The Minsk, they call it Minsk II agreement.
With Ukraine.
U.S. Yeah, we have violated that pretty badly in Ukraine.
Yeah, it's almost a joke that we issue those things, and almost simultaneously we're already breaking them as we speak those words.
Okay, well, why don't we get to our questions, Kai? Because we got a bunch of them here, and
okay.
They're all pretty good. So.
All right, which one would you like to start at?
No, let's just start at the top. You got a bunch of questions. Just go for it.
Okay, so I heard in a recent interview that you spoke about the Swiss gold to prevent the COMEX default sent out to U.S. Is that one of the pressure points we're sending out to the countries that we kind of control?
Well, it could be, but I think it might be more a rescue by the Swiss of the COMEX to prevent a failure. In a recent month, there were 21,000 tons of gold on demand standing for delivery at the COMEX versus 20.7 tons that month shipped in from Switzerland. That's a little too close to be a coincidence.
Right.
So it looks like the COMEX is really in a late stage here, really struggling to avoid a default. I think they defaulted years ago when they declared that there was forced cash redemption on gold futures contracts and silver future contracts. But apart from that, there are other problems with COMEX. It seems like the big U.S. banks are now slowly going long, buying gold and silver. And there's a lot of rumors out there, Kai, that for instance, the Chinese have hired J.P. Morgan to assist them in buying a gigantic amount of silver to replenish their stockpile. So I think the Swiss situation, some people, I think, erroneously believe that the Swiss are helping the United States to come up with enough gold to back a new dollar. I think that's a bunch of rubbish and nonsense. They would need 500 months to do that. So what's that, 40 years?
Oh, wow.
So that doesn't seem likely. I think it's much more the immediate problem of the COMEX to avoid a default.
Okay. All right. So up next, you mentioned, I think it was in the interview with, I think it was Elijah. He talked about the Tokyo Commodity Exchange, and I was wondering, is that a sign that we're pushing we're pushing Japan too much, that they're leaning towards helping China and letting China help them?
I think that's pretty much it. Yes, Japan is probably just watching the news and seeing that nothing that the United States is doing is going well. They're probably noticing that all the alliances with the United States are breaking down. They're probably noticing that all the U.S. dollar markets are fracturing. They're probably noticing extraordinary methods to keep the U.S. Treasury bond market, which is U.S. government debt, keeping that floating. And I'd like to touch very, very briefly, if I can, on the motives of the Fukushima attack.
Right.
I don't call that an accident. I call that an attack. It was just a matter of a couple months after Japan announced that they wanted to work with China on a regional East Asian currency that would be gold-backed. And next thing you know, the Bush crime family, together with Mossad, worked out the details of the Fukushima 1-2 punch there. The HARP attack plus the mini nuclear bombs to set off the north section of Japan. Okay, so the Japanese notice what their ally, United States, does for them.
Right.
They also see that China's the new industrial power. It's kind of tragic, really, that since 1980s, the United States has deindustrialized, and since 2000, 1999, most favored trade nation status was granted to China. China has been industrializing, so they're in their 16th year, and we're 30 years into deindustrializing. So where's the future for the U.S. if it continues to shed its industry and focus on financial fraud? Greenspan boasted back in the 80s that we were going to be a finance-driven economy, and we successfully offloaded our risk. Lehman fractured that entire thesis by Greenspan, and now the derivative dependence to produce U.S. Treasury bond demand, all from artificial means, the derivatives, in the face of very little, if no, legitimate investor demand. I would say Greenspan, I like calling him Green Gene sometimes, Mr. Greenspan, Sir Alan Greenspan, successfully scuttled and sabotaged the U.S. financial system. And he left Bernanke to hold the bag. Bernanke was given the task of setting up quantitative easing and the African-style monetary inflation with QE. That was not done on Greenspan's watch, so he scuttled the system, handed the baton to Bernanke, and Bernanke handed it off to a very interesting person. Janet Yellen was the chief critic of the Federal Reserve in the late years of Greenspan. She was openly critical of Dudley, who was the New York Fed governor, and to shut her up, they made her Fed chairman. I thought it was a brilliant move, dastardly. But anyway, the Japanese notice all this. And, you know, another thing happened in October of 2014. The U.S. government just came in and said, look, Japan, you're our slave. You do whatever we want. You do exactly what we say. You saw what we could do with Fukushima. We're going to steal right now your $1.2 trillion in government pension funds. So we stole their pension fund, $1.2 trillion. That's trillion with a T as in toy.
Right.
T as in trickery. So the Japanese know what we do, and they're allying with China. Japan's got some interesting problems right now. One is they've done some outsourcing to China to lower the production costs, but they've also amplified their QE. They've actually called it infinite QE. They've got more QE purchases on a ratio basis than the United States does. They're buying up the stock market, the Nikkei. They're buying up their government bonds. They're buying up property. They're buying up lots and lots of things because they do everything to the infinite level.
Right.
Okay. I think Tokyo is pretty much aligning with China, and they are making peace with Russia. They don't want any island disputes. They've made an agreement not to go to war, not to have conflict, and to continue talking, even though there might not be a whole lot of common ground. Russia wants to make naval bases on some of the islands. Japan wants to make hotels and, maybe buoy island monitors. I don't know. But I think Tokyo and China and Russia are making alliances right now.
Mm-hmm.
The Japanese are working very hard to replace some of their energy shortcomings as a result of our Fukushima attack. By the way, in Asia, they call it an attack.
They
They
do.
still call it an attack. They never called it an accident because they know what happened.
Wow. Yeah, I remember reading that they definitely cracked down on the journalists trying to report on it there, on anything of the leaking of the tanks and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, Prime Minister Abe is trying to salvage his political career now by appealing to Russia and China for an alliance, and it's a very interesting turn that Abe is making.
That's kind of shocking because by the way what they do financially, it seems like they're walking in two different directions.
Well, financially, they do exactly what we tell them, but commercially, they're, I think, working toward a role in the Eurasian trade zone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the Germans would be doing the same thing. So that's the thoughts on the Tokyo.
Okay, so up here there's a lot of people talking about the gold price. So I don't know if you want to lead up to how you think it could reach 5,000, or what are the dominoes that lead up to that?
Well, I think we're going to get a nonlinear event. We're going to get a quantum jump. Nonlinear is a mathematical term. That means that you don't draw a line on the price that goes through 1,300, then 14, then 15, 16, 17, all the way up to 2000, 21. No, we're just going to get suddenly several $100 higher price because of a dislocation and maybe a temporary shutdown of the COMEX, maybe some severe developments like lawsuits. There's financial fraud going on every day in the U.S. with respect to the COMEX. The contract states clearly delivery of the metal, but in the fine print it says that the COMEX has the right to force in extreme circumstances for the market. Well, they're calling everything extreme circumstances,
right.
So it's really a fraudulent situation. But there has been in the last, I got word of this, Kai, in early July and or late June, right around there, and it was a contact of Euroraj with one of his London connections. And the fellow said that there's a very high-level treaty in motion, the talks for a treaty.
Okay.
They're not signed on it, but they have a lot of progress on several points. And what they are trying to do is remove the dollar as the medium for satisfying global trade contracts.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, if Saudi Arabia wants a healthcare and IT system, information technology system from India, it's written in several $billion over several years, and it's written in dollar terms.
Right.
If Bolivia is to provide industrial metals to China in return for a lot of consumer goods, a wide array of consumer goods, the contract is several $billion over several years, and it's written in dollars. The problem right now with the United States and its dollar abuse is that the United States cannot yet create its own domestic dollar until the international role of the dollar is removed. The dollar is the global reserve currency, which really means two things. Banking systems around the world use the treasury bond as their reserve asset, the U.S. government debt as their reserve asset. Okay, like South Korea. They have billions and billions in their reserve asset core, underpinning their whole banking system. The other role from global reserve currency is that trade is done in the dollar, settled in the dollar, primarily led by crude oil. But for the last 3 years, I think that the petrodollar standard has been dismantled almost completely. And the last step for its dismantle is the removal of the dollar in stipulated contract terms, like Bolivia and China, like India and Saudi Arabia, not to use the dollar anymore. You cannot remove the dollar and replace it with something like gold for trade settlement unless you have a translation of the dollar and gold for the contract terms.
Right.
And this is the Basel-based Switzerland Bank for International Settlements, which represents the Western central bankers. They give orders like, Basel II rules, Basel III rules on capital ratios and management like that. And the other side is the Chinese finance representatives, like their People's Bank of China, like Finance Ministry of China, and like the White Dragons, which are playing a very large role in seeking a remedy for the toxic dollar. Okay, they've been working at this for a few months, and the word coming from the London bankers is that a lot of progress has been made, and they're focusing, give or take, on a $5,000 gold price. And once they have this international treaty done, the whole world will change. Right. It will mean that deadbeat nations with huge trade deficits will have to sacrifice after pledging their hard asset resources. I mean, like, say, Venezuela and its oil reserves. And a lot of different countries and a lot of different reserves. And if they don't have gold, they're going to have to do swaps with the Chinese to obtain the gold. And whatever they swap, they will risk losing if they continue to feature a trade deficit. And here's the risk for the United States. We have a $500 billion annual trade deficit.
Right. It's just daunting.
It's daunting. Yes, it's a nice word. But just to put things into perspective, suppose people make an argument that the United States is going to come up with their petroleum reserve.
Okay.
And petroleum reserve will back any swap that we have for a gold-backed dollar. Okay, well, that sounds all very nice until you do the calculation. I did the calculation in July, and I came up with a very nice, easy ratio. Our $500 billion in trade deficit would require 70 strategic petroleum reserves. We have 1.
Wow.
So we're not even 2% covered on our trade deficit with the strategic oil reserve. Okay, this $5,000 price is going to change the international contracts and permit the United States to make its own domestic dollar, which is having a name now, the Treasury dollar. As a result, in contrast to the current Federal Reserve note, or the Federal Reserve dollar. The Federal Reserve dollar is the African dollar.
The Zimbabwe.
Right, the Zimbabwe monetary policy with QE and the hypermonetary inflation. Hey, it didn't work for Zimbabwe, and it's not working. So we're printing money to cover the government debt in the U.S., and we're declaring the banks as sacred, too big to fail. But by saving them and providing the liquidity for them to avoid bankruptcy, we've destroyed not only the U.S. economy, but we're putting at extreme risk the entire global economy, and they're not going to tolerate it anymore. So that's why they're having this conference that's not even covered in the U.S. press. There's really not much news that's covered in the U.S. press. It's basically politics and staged violent events.
Yeah, and entertainment, like this celebrity wore this bikini.
Yeah, I mean, I like a nice bikini on a svelte woman, but I don't think it's big news, and I don't adore the Hollywood stars. I mean, the little woman who was on the series with the vampires and the romance, and she became. I mean, golly, who cares?
Right.
That pales by comparison to conflicts with Germany, and conflicts with the British exit, and conflicts over the dollar, and refusal to allow the Chinese to come in for RMB hub centers in the United States when they want them. I mean, we don't have any proper focus on our news. So, okay, that's my point on the $5,000 gold price. I thought for a while that we were going to see the Shanghai emergence with the gold market and their RMB-backed gold futures contract and their invitation or takeover, if you will, of the London gold fix, now the Shanghai gold fix. I thought we were going to see some fireworks there, and we didn't see it. And I found out why recently, Kai, and this is really kind of shocking and amazing, but it fits with so much else. The Chinese told the United States government in March that they were ready with a new gold-backed yuan. Wow. And it was going to be all tied in with the Shanghai gold fix and the Shanghai RMB-based gold contract. And they're ready to roll. And the U.S. told them that if you do that, we will regard that as an act of war. And we will be at full-scale war with China. So why don't you back off? So China told Washington, we will back off. We will put the yuan gold-backed currency tied in with Shanghai and all the financial platforms. We'll put it on hold, and we will wait for your dollar system to collapse, because that's what it's doing.
Right.
And my source told me that he had 4 different bankers in New York, 4 different banks in New York, all say the same thing, that the U.S. dollar-based system, odds are very heavy that it will not make it to January without significant bank failures that will make Lehman Brothers look small.
Wow. 4 different banks.
4 different Wall Street banks. How many are there? If you exclude Wells Fargo, I think you have 4 or 5 in Wall Street altogether. So almost all the Wall Street banks are saying the same thing. We can't hold this together. And he made a little rejoinder comment that in the last several weeks there have been 8 events that required extraordinary measures to prevent bank failures in New York. 8 events.
In the past few weeks? Wow.
The past few weeks. And any one of them would have been bigger than Lehman. So the Chinese are waiting, and they've got a gold-backed currency. When they launch it, I guarantee you, $2,000 for gold will seem cheap And people will be saying in the United States, why did I believe all the rubbish in the financial press for the last 15 years? The answer is simple. Because those owners of the press were busy buying gold. And they didn't want you to compete with them.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, I think
it's sickening. It's sickening.
Yeah, I heard there's news of Rockefeller's buying gold now, and just a whole bunch of news coming out that's what's happening. A lot of people.
Soros, a couple of months ago, Soros made news that he was supposedly buying gold, but if you looked at the fine print, not the fine print, you look at the details of what he was actually buying, the actual assets. He was buying the SPDR Gold Trust, which is known as the GLD fund. He was buying Barrick Gold stock. Okay, and I've heard that he's gotten rid of a bunch of them, and he might be getting rid of them so that he could buy some real gold, which was the story. He was buying gold. No, he wasn't. He was buying gold instruments. He was buying everything fraudulent. He was supporting the fraudulent gold instruments. So maybe now, like Rockefeller, he's buying gold. Maybe. Rothschild doesn't need to buy gold. He already owns a tremendous amount.
That's interesting.
Okay.
All right. So I think the next thing up here is about China and the International Monetary Fund and being joined in the SDR in October. And I think my question about that was just, is that part of them, or is that just the ongoings in the background of them furthering their gold-backed agenda, or is that them kind of telling the United States and Washington that this is real, this is coming?
I think it's more the latter. It's real, it's coming, and it's more a sequence of preliminary events.
Mm-hmm.
Let me get some background here on. It's the International Monetary Fund.
Right.
They have a basket of currencies, and the weights are about almost half the U.S. dollar. It's the dollar, the euro, the British pound, and the Japanese yen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, several months ago, they agreed to invite in the Chinese RMB. It's the yuan currency. They call it RMB because it's easier to keep straight. It means renminbi, which is Chinese for people's money.
Right.
Okay, call it the Chinese RMB. The RMB was invited in. They have about 11% weight. So the important point is, who lost the 11%? And the U.S. dollar lost about only 1%.
Wow.
It's about 7% lost from the euro and 3% lost from the pound, which didn't have much weight to begin with. So what you're going to see now is a number of major banking systems selling their euro bonds in favor of Chinese RMB bonds.
Mm-hmm.
Because the weight is largely against the euro in favor of the RMB. They're going to sell some UK gilts, which is the British government debt, in favor of the RMB bonds. I think the Chinese regarded the IMF basket, special drawing rights, the SDR.
Mm-hmm.
They regarded this as an infiltration method. They can get the world's financial systems to pay more attention and to instigate more demand for Chinese government debt. I've got some percentages here. I think they're correct. I don't have exact figures in front of me, but about 3% of global trade is settled in Chinese RMB. That's not much.
No.
But it's up about triple in the last few years. The other percentage is in the global banking systems, only 6% are in Chinese denominated assets like RMB bonds. That's not very much, but it's a lot more than what it was a few years ago. This move into the IMF by China to be part of the SDR basket is an infiltration system, but also a Western invitation to participate more in global banking.
Okay.
And China jumped at the opportunity. I don't think it's the centerpiece of their policy. It's a side table that assists their general program and initiative to become more an international currency. And for me, they've got to do more trade settlement in RMB, and a great start for them in their perspective would be to buy oil and pay for it in RMB, like from the Persian Gulf. Not just Saudi. It's Kuwait, it's Oman, it's Bahrain, it's Qatar.
Mm-hmm.
Iran. I think Iran is already on the verge of selling oil to China in RMB terms. It goes deeper than that. Iran and China are working out really what qualifies as barter. It's like, here's a big ledger, and Iran pledges a certain amount of oil. China pledges a whole bunch of construction projects, materials, finished products, consumer goods, and it's a big trade, and it doesn't involve a lot of currency transfer. But whatever's left over, they're going to do in RMB. So in a sense, the guarantee behind the Iranian oil sales to China will be in RMB and no longer dollar. This is how China will increase its international usage of their RMB currency. They're at a disadvantage, Kai, and it's the last point I'll make on this. It's kind of funny, and the Germans have the same problem. The Chinese cannot supply the global banking system with RMB bonds as easily as the United States can because they're not sufficiently unsuccessful. The U.S. has no problem with that because we run $1 trillion annual deficit, which gets converted into U.S. government debt securities. So there's plenty. There's an extra $1 trillion in government securities, treasury bonds, to go around the world and improve our dominance. Kai, we're improving and solidifying our dominance in the global banking system by our disastrous debt. Does that sound upside down?
Yeah, that sounds inverted.
It's inverted and temporary.
Right.
Okay. China has a solution, and their buddy in Russia will hop onto that train in a heartbeat, and they already have.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, does that, quickly segueing from that, does that involve, with our next question here, the refusal of trade or treasury bonds in trade globally?
Yeah, I think, pardon me, I think we're going to start to see more oil sales in RMB, and that's just one piece to the general problem of treasury bond refusal. Now, you've read in the news in the last several months, if not a year, of trouble in port facilities, in the giant ports like in Los Angeles, Long Beach, Oakland, in San Francisco, in the Pacific Northwest up where you are.
Right.
There have been a lot of problems with ships that don't unload. I think we're being told some lies as to what is going on. We're told of dock worker strikes. Pardon me. We're told of strikes with respect to pay scales and safety conditions and worker rules and all kinds of things. I think we're being lied to. And I only have a few anecdote stories to back this up.
Okay.
But there's less trade coming into the ports, and maybe therefore the dock workers are upset that they're not making as much money. I don't know exactly how the pay scales work, but that probably translates to some strain on the pay scales. I don't think this has anything to do with safety conditions. I think that's a pure lie.
Yeah.
What I think is happening instead is the ships are arriving, and they're being told, and they are telling the U.S. ports, we want payment, but not in dollars. I think the strike has to do with Treasury bill refusal. And the press is being told, do not report that. Instead, report it as a dock worker strike with pay scales and working conditions and safety measures and all kinds of things that are maybe, down the list in priorities and real, but not the main reason. The main reason is Treasury bonds, Treasury bills for payment is being refused. And here's an exact example, precise example for that.
Okay.
I made that point. I've been making this point for a while, Kai.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a client who sat in on a Bobcat Corporation board meeting.
Right.
This is Bobcat based in North Dakota, which has a parent company of South Korea. And they have been refusing this is like, small earth movers digging a trench, forklifts, things like that. The small warehouse and construction machinery. That's
Right.
Bobcat.
Mm-hmm.
They're refusing Treasury bills at the port on orders from the Korean parent company.
Wow.
This is just one of, I think, hundreds of companies that are refusing Treasury bill payment. Why would they refuse Treasury bills? Because we're printing them. Because they're worthless. Bernanke boasted that we have a device that costs nothing. No, we have an output that has zero value. The Treasury bill.
Right.
You print something for free, it's worth nothing. In Spanish here, I got confused because I'd walk up to a counter and I'd say to my friend, how do I say, what does that cost? And he says, ¿cuánto vale? What is that worth? And I said, no, what does it cost? He said, well, ¿cuánto cuesta? I said, that's a big difference. What is it worth? What does it cost? Big difference.
Right.
What does it cost to print $1? Nothing. What is it worth? Well, we declare that it's worth something, but it's not. It's worth nothing. Okay, we're already in the, I think, middle stages of the dollar rejection at the ports.
Mm-hmm.
This is a suppressed story. I think there are lots more like it. I always enjoy people sending me information who are people who are not clients. They use my contact us from the goldenjackass.com. I get a tremendous amount of information through that. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I got some confirming information on Thailand Air Force bases during the Vietnam War on shipping heroin in soldier coffins. A lot more detail on that. And it's sickening, but it's also enlightening. I got some information on the Taijin explosion from a little over a year ago in Japan. It was not...
China? Tianjin?
I'm sorry. Yeah, right. Tianjin.
Right.
In China, right. It was 8,000-ton warehouse of fertilizer. They were too embarrassed to say they put in a central place all their fertilizer. That's very risky. They're not doing that anymore. So it left a crater that looked like a mini nuclear event. No, it was a fertilizer. Okay, so anyway, we're in the late stages or middle stages here of dollar rejection, Treasury bill rejection for trade. We cannot legitimately pay with monopoly money.
Right.
By the Federal Reserve that costs nothing for finished products and materials from emerging market nations and other nations that actually, through sweat, produce things in ways that the United States does not. The United States has become a deadbeat nation, and the proof is $500 billion annual trade deficit in dollars. Yeah. It actually went up in the most recent month of reporting, Kai. I thought, gosh, is that even possible? No, it was big. We're over $500 billion now on an annualized basis.
Yeah, that is as backwards as you can be.
It's shocking, and it cannot stand.
No, there's no way. All right, let's see here for the next question. I think I had new financial events again, but we already kind of went over that in the beginning. Let's see. Do you know much about the TPP?
Well, yeah, I know a few things. It's the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Mm-hmm.
It has a European equivalent. It's the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Let me just explain what these are to begin with.
Okay.
These are trade unions with the United States. The TPP for the Pacific is a trade union with East Asia, but also a little bit of South America, like Chile and Ecuador. Not Argentina. It's Pacific, so it's coastal.
Right.
The trade union with Europe, it's largely the same kind of rules. What I like to focus on are its main features.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's a trade union. Okay. Who runs it? The corporations. Who claim the rights of assets? The corporations. Who claims the rights to settle disputes? The corporations.
Right.
Who claims the ownership of intellectual property? The corporations. These are fascist trade unions, Kai.
Yep.
They're not about fair trade. They're not about free trade zones. They're about fascist corporate rules. Okay, the other characteristics. It talks a lot. These trade unions talk a lot about control of the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Settlement of disputes. I'll give you an example. It's not absurd, but it is possible if this goes through. And I don't think any trade union is going anywhere. They can't even get to the second step of 10. Germany declared the DTIP to be dead in the water. Okay, that's
right.
Not revivable. You could say tits up, whatever you want to call it. It's not revivable. Okay, here's an absurd little story that would be possible if this trade union went into effect. Major corporations would involve the major websites for intellectual property and control of information. So, for instance, the COMEX website, or say the Perth Mint, might claim the Golden Jackass is infringing on their website claims.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore take control of the Golden Jackass site, take control of the hat trick letter, close it down. Why? Because it's about gold. Who settles the dispute? The corporations. What voice would the jackass have? Zero.
Right.
Who would own the website after the dispute is settled? The COMEX or Perth Mint?
Wow.
Or Kitco, which is another representative of the COMEX corruption. Kitco. Okay, so there goes free speech and analysis on a competent level with respect to gold. Why? Because the major corporations own the websites.
Right.
Where's the dispute settled? Major corporations set up a board. If you want an example of how the major corporations set up dispute resolution boards, look no further than stock brokerage, which has the Security and Exchange Commission and a nice, handy Wall Street ex-banker on the board to settle the dispute, which the investors never win. Okay, what's the effect of the trade unions if they go into effect? What's the effect going to be on gold and silver?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. The bigger effect would be on corporate structure and intellectual property, and as a result, commerce. I don't really look at the effect of the trade unions as they would have on gold and silver. I'm sure that has some effect, but I don't think that's the main focus.
Right.
The main focus is the spread of the fascist global state.
Right. I mean, like the way you explain it, it seems that anything that interferes with their process, they can just absorb and deactivate it as they wish. Like as you said, pure fascist.
Exactly. Absorb it and dissolve it. Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's extremely scary.
Well, it is. It's the spread of fascism. It would mean that the UK and United States and Israel axis of fascism would spread to Southeast Asia, East Asia, and the Pacific coast of Latin America, and also extend to Britain and the European Union.
Right.
Well, what's left? What's left is Africa and the Middle East and the islands in Peloponnesia. This is a sweeping power grab by corporations, and people really need to understand what fascism is. We've had fascism in the United States since 2001. After the Lehman event, after 9/11, it's all pure fascism. And the example is very clear. Too big to fail banks. They've been made sacred. So they're crime centers, impervious, and with total impunity. There's no prosecution against Wall Street for anything. Okay, that is what fascism brings you. It also brings you war, because other important corporations are the military contractors, and if there's endless war, there's endless profit.
Right.
It's very sickening. Fascism is not well understood in the United States. We don't regard our nation as a fascist state, when it is precisely.
Right. Yeah, not many people know the definition of that, where they seem to call Donald Trump fascist a lot and not really understand that it's Hillary who's their choice.
Yeah, Trump is not a fascist. Trump is a capitalist to the extreme.
Mm-hmm.
Hillary is a fascist and a Satanist to the extreme.
Right.
And now she's faking her campaign speeches to empty audiences with falsified green room tapes. It's just amazing what's going on. She falsified now her campaign speeches, just like they falsified the polls.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing what the fascist state can do. They don't like to give up power. They don't like to give up anything. They just continue. And when things don't work, they amplify the power rather than to promote a remedy.
Right. Yeah. It's on the verge of some intense stuff, that's for sure. All right, let's see if we can swing into the next question here. Is that we've talked about global reset, or you've talked about global reset before, and my question is, if that does happen, when that does happen, how would the average person go about applying their precious metals after the reset?
Well, this is an obscure point. I mean, are you asking what would the value be of gold and silver?
I mean, I know
can it be used to buy things? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, well, I had a few people say like, well, what would we even do with gold and silver if all this stuff is true? If the economy does reset, the markets do reset, how do we go about using gold and silver?
Well, after the reset, people might find that the dollars that they have won't be buying much, and some vendors won't want them. So the question is, how do you go about using it? It might be the main item that vendors want.
Right.
So the focus of the question by the people points out the ignorance of what money is.
Right.
If you have a new dollar launched for domestic U.S. purposes only, it's going to be devalued, and brutally so. So when you look to go, say, buy a television set, you might have some difficult decisions, like, do I buy it today or do I buy it next week when the price might be 5% higher because it's imported? But the vendor will take an equal amount of silver that doesn't change from week to week. Now that's a very important point to ponder. You might be interested in buying a car, and since most cars are imported, over 50%, suppose you want to buy a Toyota. You're told, well, here's the price today, but the price keeps going up every month because it's imported. But if you pay in a certain number of gold coins, it's constant every month. So people are going to be given an education on what money is and how the dollar has not been money, because we're going to see a brutal sequence of devaluations for the dollar, which will be manifested in steadily rising prices that will shock the nation. Americans don't know, I think, shit from Shinola of what money is, of what capital is, and what inflation is. Nor do they know what fascism is. And they certainly don't know what democracy is or how it's practiced. So we're going to be given a lesson on what money is and how inflation is going to come back to the United States, which has been exported for 30 years. Now it's going to be imported, because we're going to be forced to do our domestic-only dollar, and the price of imports will go up almost every single month. So if you're wondering what do you do with your gold and silver, you enjoy using it because it will be of stable value and not decreasing value.
Right. Well, that's a good answer. Yeah, I just have some people who are some friends. When I talk about this kind of stuff, they just really don't grasp what tangible wealth is. They see currency and they think, oh, that makes precious metals obsolete. It's like, no, that's not how it is. This is real wealth. It's static wealth.
Well, if you want to expose their ignorance, ask them, how do you accumulate wealth? And they'll probably mention an investment like the stock market, which bypasses capital. So they don't understand capital, they don't understand money, they don't understand inflation. How do you make money? Well, you invest in Apple stock. No, how do you make money, you idiot? You buy some equipment, you make a product, and you sell it by producing it efficiently.
Right.
And using a payroll, hiring people.
Yeah,
I don't know what capital is.
I guess when you get a nation that sheds all its manufacturing and becomes a service economy, then people really don't understand what's going on.
Well, they don't understand how to accumulate wealth. How do you form wealth? I like the term capital formation. Mm-hmm. You buy a store, and in the back you produce things, and in the front you sell things. In the back you use some really clever intellectual property. You hire some well-trained people. You have a smart manager. You produce things with a value added. Mm-hmm. The value added produces wealth and profit. It's not from buying Apple stock. It's not from an investment that bypasses capital. The United States is attempting to produce wealth by working around the capital formation stage. This is a critical, fatal national error.
Mm-hmm. Huge. All right. Let's see here. We can go on to the next question. And I honestly, I wanted to hear your thoughts on, because with the Brexit happening and a few articles I've read, it seems that hot topics coming up are Texas seceding from the United States, and even Hawaii seceding from the United States. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on those.
Well, first Texas. I know more about Texas.
Right.
The Texas State Pension Fund, I know that's not exactly what it is. Pardon me, I got a little water. Wrong tube. I think it was the Texas Teachers Pension Fund. I'm not certain of that. But it was a Texas pension fund. And they had $1 billion in gold reserves stored at the New York Fed. They want it back.
Right.
And that's tonnage. The New York Fed told them to go to hell. Like they tell everybody to go to hell. They told the Germans, the French, the Dutch, the Austrians. They told them all to go to hell. Why? Because they stole it. And they don't use the word steal. They use the word rehypothecate. Okay. All that means is they took the gold, they sold it because they needed it and they wanted it, and they were the custodian of it. So it was easy to do. It was under their thumb, under their wing. And they replaced it with a certificate that says you still own the 1 ton of gold. Okay, fine. Well, it's not fine. It's theft. I mean, if you go into a home in the middle of the night and you steal a bunch of jewelry and you put in an IOU that says Kai owes you $18,000 for this jewelry, will you go to jail if you were caught?
Most likely.
Most likely. Do the bankers go to jail when they steal the gold and replace it with a certificate? No, never.
No.
Okay, Texas wanted their gold back, roughly $1 billion from the New York Fed. I made a forecast. My best estimate is this was September of 2014. I made a forecast, another one of my unusual forecasts. I've got a few that are not exactly financial. I made a forecast because Texas made a formal demand to the New York Fed for the return. They call it repatriation. Not really repatriation because it's not sent back to a country, which has the patriota root. It was returned to the state of Texas their gold. I made a forecast that within a month or two we're going to see a chemical explosion in Texas as a warning. And it happened right on time. 3 weeks later, a big Texas chemical explosion took place, and the demand for the New York Fed for their gold quieted down suddenly. Well, it's back on the burner again because there haven't been any more chemical plant explosions.
Right.
Which I believe the New York Fed hired. I don't have any proof. Call me a wild man. Why is it so? Why would I be called a wild man when I made an outrageous forecast that came true? Let me just quickly tell you, I made another outrageous forecast back in 2011. It came to my attention that we are never going to see any kind of justice for the top bankers of the world and all their trillion-dollar thefts. What the Voice called Nuremberg banker trials. He said, no, never going to happen. So the next day I told him, well, Mr. Voice, I think as a result, we're going to see a lot of mid-level banker murders. He said, probably so, and not very long to wait. I said, because there are too many mules, too many analysts who set up the offshore accounts, and too many other people who know too much at mid-level banking positions.
Right.
Not low enough to be ignorant and not high enough to be protected, therefore expendable. It was not. I got it right. There were a bunch. There were 50 banker murders. They call them suicides. A few they did not call suicide because it was, guys on motorcycles shot into a home in Belgium and killed a man and his wife. And he was a banker or insurance executive. It's pretty hard to call that a suicide when there are witnesses of a motorcycle with a machine gun.
Right.
But there was another guy who put 2 shotgun blasts into his chest. That was called suicide. And I wonder, how did the second blast take place? Then there was another guy blamed on the Russians of putting 10 nail gun shots into a guy's face and chest. Well, gosh, after the first 2, who did the rest? I mean,
right.
What I missed, though, is something that was far more insidious regarding the banker murders than I originally thought. Wall Street put out insurance contracts on their mid-level officers.
Oh.
And called them valuable assets to be insured.
Wow.
And they collected on their own murders. Okay. They had a name, Special Indemnity Fund or something like that. Can't remember. All right, so Texas suffered a chemical plant explosion about 2 years ago, and it went off the main burner, and now it's back on. Texas probably is noticing that the bankers are weaker now, that they've got fewer friends, that they've got more holes to plug, more emergencies to deal with, that their structures are breaking, that they're in trouble in a very, very profound way, unlike 2014. So now Texas is attempting to secede from the Union. If there's any state in the United States that has a chance or has the moxie, has the courage, has the temperament, has the history of being independent-minded, it is Texas.
Right, I agree. And I think that Texas, they get a lot of heat because it seems to be like the hive for all the Second Amendment, pro-Second Amendment, conspiracy theorists, as they like to say. And I don't know. I think that I think like how you said they could do it. They've got the spirit for it for sure.
Well, I wish them luck, but notice how I phrase that. If any state has a chance, it is Texas. But I think it's very, very difficult.
Right.
Very difficult to pull off because the United States is considered a federal union, and they don't give up power. They don't share power. They don't really share anything. They steal from their subjects and vassals.
Right. They might do like EU and just kind of entertain the referendum and then tell them, well, we're not going to let you leave anyway.
Well, yeah, it could be. I don't know. There's no precedent for departing the Union. You can't say, well, Louisiana did it in 1872, and we're going to follow these same pathways.
Okay.
But as for Hawaii, I don't know. I only learned recently, the last few days, that China has threatened to fund some Hawaiian separatists. The Voice made a comment about 3 or 4 years ago. No, about 5 or 6 years ago, post-Lehman. He said that the U.S. government debt was going to be defaulted upon. And China has plans to take control of Hawaii. They want the naval port.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's probably one of the most strategic points you can have. It's smack dab in the middle of so many countries. But I think the reason I wanted to bring it up is because, I mean, Hawaii was a monarchy. It was illegally annexed, and they have royal gold there. They have a school there called Kamehameha Schools, and it's funded by royal gold. I'm not sure how much they have, but I was just curious because the fact that, I mean, China obviously has an interest in them because of the military positioning of the islands. But I was just wondering if they had a chance to secede because they used to be a monarchy. They used to be respected around the globe, but it seems that they're too dependent on the United States and they couldn't handle being cut off unless... go ahead.
No, you're from Hawaii. Go ahead.
Okay. No, I just think like they couldn't last on themselves and they would have to go under the wing of another larger country, and I think China definitely has an interest in that for sure.
Well, when there's a debt default, it has a lot of consequences.
Right.
It brings to the fore lots of different claims that the dominant nation that is now bankrupt did this or did that or did some other things illegally. And now is the opportunity to rectify it because the dominant nation no longer has the power.
Mm-hmm.
And the power lies with the creditors. And the chief creditor is China. The Voice made claims that Russia might go after Alaska, China might go after Hawaii, and Mexico might go after California, New Mexico, and Arizona. But the most important aspect of any claim for such separatism or whatever is illegal motions to make it part of the Union. And what the Voice has informed me on, and it surprised me, this was several years ago, he said that the Seward purchase of Alaska from Russia was not a purchase. It was a 100-year lease.
Really?
And the U.S. government is saying, well, 100 years is really forever. Well, I don't know that you can say that in the courts. So then the question becomes, what court would see the case, and then what court would have the courage to give it a fair judgment?
Right.
When it comes to Mexico, that's more like a war and a seizure and a lost war and a treaty. I don't. That's very complicated. Now, I didn't know. You claimed that Hawaii was a monarchy and it was illegally annexed.
Yes.
I don't know if that can be proved. The documents exist, or the owners of the documents have been murdered. You know, it gets very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know how this works. I think that the only truly legitimate annexation by the United States was the Louisiana Purchase. That was Louisiana and Mississippi and Arkansas, parts of other neighboring states. It was for $5 million. It was from the French king, and I think the French regretted it in a matter of 20 years.
Yeah.
So it gets very, very messy. I'm not an expert in international law like this, but
Right.
What I do have knowledge of is that once a nation becomes bankrupt, it cedes all legal rights to its creditors, and that is China. And I think Russia might have made a bit of a mistake by selling so many treasury bonds, because they're losing their position as major creditor. What they probably did was they said to China, look, you go ahead, maybe buy a little bit more of the treasury bonds. Then you can run this show when it comes to the bankruptcy. I mean, Ben Fulford is very bold when he says that in March of 2015, the Federal Reserve went into bankruptcy and the International Court of The Hague settled the case. That's roughly when you saw the Chinese take control of J.P. Morgan One Chase Plaza property for a tremendous discount on the price, which means it was probably part of a default settlement. Okay, so There's a lot going on behind the scenes. U.S. citizens are the most poorly informed of any nation of the industrial nations on earth.
It's almost, we don't even want the information here. We just want more of the grand illusion, more of the distractions.
Well, it seems that way. I think we're basically an entertainment culture, a social network culture, an ignorant culture. I don't think we qualify as even in the top 3 for the industrialized 20 nations for, math and science and patents anymore. It used to be when I was a kid that the United States produced more patents than the rest of the world combined. And those days are long gone.
Yeah.
Long gone. So it's getting sad. I mean, the U.S., I've been making the point for the last few years, Kai, that there are a lot of political analysts who have criteria for a third world nation. Let me start with another criteria. A police state is defined as a nation with 20% of the people the able-bodied workers working either for the army or the police. 20%. That's the agreed upon definition by political scientists. Well, the political science crowd also has 20 criteria for a third world nation. Like crumbling infrastructure, corrupt police system, corrupt banking system, printing money to cover your debt, like inflation to cover your debt, monetized debt, in other words, rigged elections, constant war, false flag attacks, internal violence. Okay, the United States is right up there in third world nation status now, and it's tragic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I get people laughing at me saying, Jim, you're calling the U.S. the third world nation. I said, do you even know what the criteria are? No. I said, well, there are 20. You want me to list several? Sure. I list several. I say, this applies, this applies, this applies, this applies, this applies. What does not apply? And he said, oh, I see your point. Yeah, but we're still a great country. Yeah, we have a lot of big buildings. I talk to Latinos here, and they don't understand. They do not understand the U.S. is approaching bankruptcy and insolvency and breakdown. And they come back. Every single one of them says the same thing. You've got a lot of big buildings in your cities. I said, well, you don't even know who owns them. Chinese own a third of them. What? How could that be, they say. Well, I said, you need to learn more about the United States in order to have opinions about it. So, yeah. There's a lot changing, Kai. A lot is changing.
Yeah, the acceleration is, I thought it couldn't speed up, and it just keeps getting faster and faster.
Well, the speed right now is happening in the bond market.
Mm-hmm.
I like focusing on finance economics. Okay, it's fine and dandy to look for these stories like Bobcat where the Treasury bills are being refused at ports for payment. Mm-hmm. I like looking at breakdown evidence like truck freight shipment data, mm-hmm. electricity usage, rail car data for freight shipment, port facilities, and here's the most shocking of all for port facilities. In 2015, the United States exported 500,000 containers. Exported. Empty. So, what are our major exports from the United States? Fraudulent bonds, military weapons, diabetes, and empty containers.
Right.
They go back empty. They go to China or East Asia, and they come back with something, and they go back into the ports, and they return empty. They come back from Asia, return to the ports to supply our consumer economy. If you want a suicide in an economy, make it a consumer economy as opposed to an industrial economy like Germany. Germany did not outsource its industry. Why? Because they did not want to commit suicide.
Right.
Wow.
Man.
These are end stages, Kai.
Right.
Okay.
All right. So you want to move on to the next thing? Here?
Sure.
I think kind of like a backstep here. It's about the devalued dollar. I know China said they wanted us to do it in 2 intervals, like a certain percent. I don't remember the percent, and I just wanted to know what that would mean for the housing market and Americans holding debt and shipping companies if, like how you said, the price is gonna change weekly, or the value of it, a new devalued dollar.
Well, it's hard to say. First, it has to be launched.
Right.
I hear that there is a parallel dollar, the Treasury dollar. Mm-hmm. It exists, but it's not being discussed. It's not being promoted. Mm-hmm. Not being used. So it's just a shelf item. The Chinese told the United States, because of your debt situation, your $500 billion annual trade deficit, because of your $1 trillion government deficit, over half of which is military spending, mm-hmm. they demanded that the United States come up with a new dollar with a 50% devaluation, however they arrive at it. And the United States said, well, we can't do a dollar with a 50% deval. We can do a new dollar with a 30% deval and later do another 30%. And here's a nice, easy way to keep track of devaluations and retain value. If you do a 30% devaluation, you're holding 70% of its value. If you do another 30%, you're holding 70% of that 70%, which is 49%. And there you have your 50%, 51%.
Right.
So two 30% devals produces a 50% devaluation overall. Because you retain 70, then you retain 70% of that 70. Okay, the effect on the housing market? Well, to begin with, you have to focus on the shock. There will be a transition period of shock. And the main question is, wow, what was that? What happened? What's going on? I don't understand. I need time to figure this out. What is this new dollar? What is it for? What is it worth? Are the prices going to change? Are we going to see supply shortage? What's going on? Okay, you have shock. You have a lot of disorder. You have a lot of questions. You have a lot of learning and ignorance clashing.
Right.
Okay. If you see a devaluation of the dollar upon a new launch of a treasury dollar, which is for domestic only. You're not going to go to Panama or to Hong Kong or points in Europe and say, you've got some dollars, they're just like mine. No, not after the new launch. It's domestic dollar versus international dollar.
Right.
Begs the question, who's going to be in charge of the international dollar? Answer, China and the IMF. International Monetary Fund. China runs the International Monetary Fund. They don't want that to be publicized. They're the major contributor. The U.S. has not contributed for 3 consecutive years to the IMF. We're a deadbeat with respect to the IMF. We're not running it anymore. We're just having a person who's a spokeswoman, that Lagarde person. Don't know if it's a man or woman. Okay, so what will happen to the housing market? I don't know. We have to get through the confusion and that transition period where a lot of things have to be settled. Right. If the dollar goes down, it stands to reason that all internal assets will go down with a similar devaluation. If your house is worth $150,000 or a nice condo is worth $150,000, and the country has a devaluation with the new currency, a French person, a Brazilian person, a Chinese person, an Australian person, a Moroccan person will look at that and say, well, it just went down 30%. Everything went down 30%. But don't forget the feedback loop, which is what U.S. economists are so horrible at doing. A lower valued dollar means that the British can come in and say, wow, I can buy that South Florida little condo or that nice mansion, I can buy it at a discount. And suddenly you have new demand that is nothing but owing to the devalued dollar. And you're going to get a feedback loop that produces extra demand. This is precisely what happened, and my correct forecast only a month ago, that the British would see a positive result for their economy from the lowered British pound. They had a 20% decline in the British pound. The British press said this could be disastrous for the country. They're now having an enormous increase in tourism. This is a positive feedback loop. Western economists have no concept of feedback loops. They figure, well, here's another example of a drop ball on feedback loop analysis. They say, we're going to impose a 5% tax on this, and it will generate this amount of income for the next 3 years. Well, it does for the first 6 months, but then the feedback loop comes in. It wrecks the economy somewhat. It causes a recession, and in the third year, there's no increase at all. In fact, it's a decrease because it did damage to the economy. Tax increases always do damage to the economy, just like Obamacare. Obamacare is a health care tax. It's done tremendous damage to the U.S. economy, specifically to small business. Okay, so the feedback loop is going to be important. It'll help the housing market. I'm hearing that the Vancouver property market has suffered a pinprick. It's now down something like 15% in a single month. There are a lot of factors behind it. I don't want to get into that. Mm-hmm. Americans holding debt. This is a very troublesome question. There's no exact answer, but what I like to point to is the example in 1993 and 4 when the Mexican peso crisis took place. There was a very big devaluation in the Mexican peso, and all debt holders were told that their balances would rise in proportion to the debt, rise in proportion to the devaluation of the peso, so that the bankers had no reduced liability due to them. In other words, people owed the same amount of money to the banks in old money terms. So if there's a 30% devaluation of the peso and they owed 2 million pesos to a bank, it's now 30% more. Their balances increased in proportion to the devaluation of the peso. Okay, simple question, Kai. People owning consumer debt or mortgage debt, do you think the banks, given the power they have in the United States, do you think they're going to take a hit?
I think
never.
Yeah.
Never. So they will arrange things with their lobbyists in Washington, as they did with the financial regulatory bill in 2008 following Lehman Brothers, which started out as a noble cause and ended up as a Goldman Sachs and Citigroup project to write the whole thing after bribing Barney Frank and Senator Dodd. That's how it works in the United States. So I don't think we're going to see any relief for the debtors. And besides, the bankers want to impose a debt slave state and make you a debt vassal.
Right. They want to wipe out the middle class and create a mega population of serfs, basically.
And by
debt
increasing
serfs.
your debt load, they work toward that goal. So why would they make a debt relief from a devaluation? It doesn't serve their purposes. It does not comply with the whole theme of banker power. And I don't think it's going to happen. As for shipping company, I don't know. I don't study that as an asset value.
Right, okay. All right, and so the next thing, well, we kind of already talked about the countries that are leaning east, Germany, Turkey, Japan, South Korea. I don't know if you wanted to talk about those a little bit more, or just you want to just go into the last question here.
Let's just touch on Turkey a little bit.
Okay.
I think the Turkish story is one of the biggest, one of the top 5 stories in our generation. We tried a military coup using a protected cleric named Gulen, who's hiding out in the Pennsylvania hills of the Poconos. Wow. According to past definitions, he would be declared a terrorist. We're harboring him. I believe we used him as a scapegoat in case the U.S.-led coup d'etat in Turkey failed. It did fail. Now we continue to protect Gulen. The Turkish government wants Gulen back. They want him as a revolutionary traitor, that sort of thing. It's their business. But I believe what happened was Putin said to Erdogan, the president, yeah, shooting down our Air Force pilot and killing the rescue helicopter crew, that was not a good thing. But I think Putin said to Erdogan, if you apologize and admit fault and want to work toward positive ends, we'll let bygones be bygones and we'll work toward a positive future.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got to work with Russia, and you've got to step back from the U.S. shadow. So Erdogan made an apology, and right away, Putin said, all's well. We're going to open the gates eventually for tourism. And a few weeks later, the Turkish Stream gas pipeline for Gazprom was put back on schedule. And a lot of pipe material that's been sitting in Bulgaria in storage will be moved into Turkey. And this will bring about a lot of jobs to help the really wrecked Turkish economy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why Erdogan made the apology, because he realized that following U.S. guidelines destroyed their economy. Everything the U.S. touches with foreign policy turns to rubble and shit.
Right.
So Turkey suffered it. They made an apology. Now it's not just the Turkish Stream pipeline that's back online. It's not just tourism that's ramping up. It's the big nuclear facility that Rosatom, the Russian atomic state-owned company,
Mm-hmm.
they're moving forward. And that's going to be a big project. And it's not just that. There are a number of other smaller ones, like a huge natural gas storage facility in Turkey. Russian commerce with Turkey is back on track.
Right.
And with China buying the Piraeus shipping company in Greece, I think we have China working with Greece and Russia working with Turkey, so that the entire Eastern Mediterranean is lost by the U.S. and European Union to the Eurasian trade zone run by Russia and China.
Right.
The U.S. can no longer expect to block the Bosporus Straits, can no longer expect to run an attack. They're actually staging right now an attack on Crimea. We're trying to provoke a war with Russia.
Right.
And Russia just won't let it happen. So it's pretty sad what's happening, but I think Turkey is going to abandon its NATO role. In fact, if you just look at the evidence, it has no NATO role. So what is its future in NATO if it has no role? Russia is right now working contracts to take control and rent large portions of the Incirlik NATO Air Force Base. Kai,
Mm-hmm.
do you think maybe the Turkish situation is a gigantic failure in U.S. foreign policy?
Sure looks like one, but I mean, another man's trash, another man's treasure, right?
Right, it's Russia's treasure.
Yeah.
We crashed it, and it became Russia's treasure. The nuclear bombs have all been moved off in Incirlik Air Force Base. They've been moved to Bulgaria and Romania.
Mm-hmm.
My gosh, what idiot leaders would allow such things in Eastern Europe? And we call Russia aggressive.
Right. Well,
Okay.
that's the inversion of the media right there.
So, with respect to Germany, Turkey, Japan, I don't know so much about South Korea flipping. But Turkey, Germany, and Japan, they're definitely flipping east,
Mm-hmm.
and in a big way. And I think they're all going to be major stories in the near future. They're just blossoming now as stories. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that kind of segues into my next question. Is like, it's sort of like how you said, they're provoking war. It's the lines of the World War III being drawn. And I wanted to ask, as the last question, is the reset of the markets and the dollar being quarantined out of trade and kind of fading away, could it mean that these elections are all really just a distraction and that we've been preparing for an Obama third term like this whole time?
Well, let me first address this World War III lines being drawn.
Okay.
I thought that merits an answer on its own.
Okay.
I get a lot of questions. One question that kind of amuses me is, when will the U.S. financial system start to break down? And my answer to them is 2007. They're thinking future, and they have not noticed the present and the past.
Right.
People ask me, when do you think World War III might happen, or do you think it might happen? And I say February 2014, the Ukraine war.
Right.
That is World War III. I'm not talking about a Cold War. I'm not talking about a financial war. I'm talking about an actual hot war. The U.S. has fired numerous micronuclear bombs in Ukraine. Nobody cares. It's the intention is to create a firewall, a scorched earth region, through which no pipeline can pass from Russia to Europe. And it's kind of like the U.S. neocon Nazis didn't read the war history, or World War history recently too well. They didn't read the Maginot Line very well. Okay, the Maginot Line was a line, I think it was located in Belgium, to separate the Germans from the French.
Mm-hmm.
So the Germans dropped paratroopers over the line. I mean, golly! You have scorched earth in Ukraine, so they moved the pipeline through Turkey. And with all the bad decisions the United States made with respect to Ankara, not the least of which was running our ISIS program, which is developed in Langley, the CIA, funded by Langley's narcotics money, staffed by mercenaries paid by Langley and the Saudis, supplied by weapons from the United States, including a truck from Texas, from a guy who said, gosh, why is my plumbing company with its Toyota pickup truck, why is it shown on the news as an ISIS vehicle?
Right.
It's because Langley does its purchasing all across the U.S. and the southern states for easier shipping to ISIS. Okay, we made a lot of mistakes with respect to Turkey, and we've used our U.S. Embassy in Ankara, Turkey, as an ISIS field command headquarters. It's all backfiring. Almost everything we do on foreign policy is backfiring. Mm-hmm. So I think World War III started in Ukraine and had an extension to Syria. Syria is more clearly a loss on the military front due to the hand of the Russian military. And now China has brought in some observers and military experts, if you want to call them that. They're nothing more than witnesses and buffers to make sure that no conflagration takes place in Syria. Secretary of State John Kerry has made a few trips to the Kremlin. Mm-hmm. These are surrender talks, never described as such in the U.S. press. So World War III started with Ukraine in February 2014, and the surrender talks are in progress.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, I know. As for Obama third term, no, much more likely is it would be a fellow wearing. I mean, if we have a fair election, here's my best guess. I'm a statistician. I read polls. I read about bias within polls. I read about contrast of two disagreeing polls. I know how to look at the confidence intervals of difference of two polls. You multiply by square root of 2 the standard error, and gosh, if you get 5 times a legitimate standard error for a difference, you conclude that one of the two polls is fraudulent. Most major polls in the United States are fraudulent. Mm-hmm. They defrauded the polls before the primaries to make Hillary look like a viable candidate. They stole the election in California away from Bernie Sanders to make Hillary the winner. Mm-hmm. Now Hillary is making campaign stops in front of empty audiences with green screen background and phony people. Oh gosh, it's such a fraud.
Yeah,
everything's a fraud. My best guess, Kai, is that Trump is ahead something like 65 to 20.
Right.
65 to 25. 60 to 25. Yeah. Something like that. He's with a 30% lead. The press is reporting it as a Hillary 10 to 15% lead.
Mm-hmm.
The lie is something like 50%. I'm very anxious to see the debates.
Right.
Because Hillary is not a very smart person.
No.
She failed every bar exam, including Washington, D.C. The only one she could pass was the low bar exam in Arkansas. She was part of the Watergate committee and removed from it for being stupid.
Right, and unconstitutional.
Unconstitutional, unethical, recommended a lot of illegal things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so she's perfect for the Bush-Clinton crime family.
Right.
Okay, all right, so if the election goes off, I think they're going to have a very hard time allowing a fraud that makes and declares Hillary the winner. I'm not sure she's going to survive the debates. I think something might happen. But if we do have a legitimate election, or if by default Trump wins, it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be extremely interesting. I think it's possible that there'll be some sabotage. If Trump is made president, is permitted to be elected president, then it's very possible we could see the launch of the new dollar in order to disrupt the entire process of him cleaning house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but if there is a major problem with a new Trump presidency, I think it's much more likely that we're going to see something like a Pentagon general taking control rather than Obama in a third term.
Oh, really? That would be interesting to see. Because they definitely do not want him to be president.
It's getting very ugly, very confusing, very chaotic, very criminal. There are a lot of reports that the Hillary backers have murdered at least 5 people since May.
Yeah, the DNC staffers.
Yeah, it seems like anyone who's set to testify before Congress commits suicide the day or two before.
Mm-hmm.
This is very, very messy. And I don't know how it's going to turn out. I do believe that there are going to be some pleasant surprises.
Oh, yeah. I think we're on a calm before the storm point for real.
It's I don't have any solid answers here.
Right.
What's going to happen? I don't know. Will Hillary be elected? I don't know. Will they steal the election? I don't know. Will they ship in millions of Africans to vote for Hillary? I don't know. Will they ship in millions of Latinos to vote for Hillary? I don't know. Will they not count millions of Trump votes? Will the machines just simply flip the votes? And remember, the Patriot Act and follow-on act with Homeland Security make it illegal. It's not even legally possible to challenge voting machine software. So the fraud is permitted and protected.
Right.
This is very confusing. We've never been here before. We're in a climax of the electoral process breakdown.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There's a lot of routes they could take, and we just gotta go through it. But yeah. Go ahead.
I don't know how we're going to go through it, but I believe that there might be some plans in place for a fellow with a uniform and a bunch of decorations on his lapels.
Mm-hmm.
That's far more likely than Obama continuing.
Okay.
Now they would need martial law. Martial law is not an impossibility here. I don't know. We don't have a lot of precedent.
No.
I think the staged violent events that we've seen around the country, which include Orlando, my gosh, in Orlando, they got caught with people taking videos of blood all over mannequins coming out of the nightclub.
Yeah. They also reported that no one had died until SWAT had entered, which doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right, and they also have photographs, videos of moving dead bodies into the nightclub. So any dead bodies might have been straight from the morgue by way of the nightclub back to the morgue. I mean, this is very messy stuff. I believe the Boston Marathon was a staged event.
Mm-hmm.
I believe a number of them were staged events. Sandy Hook was a staged event. I have clients in Connecticut who say, Jim, don't fall for the Sandy Hook story. The school had been closed for 2 years.
Right, and it was just randomly opened again.
I mean, open just so that they could have the kids missing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the staged violence is just that. It's staged.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's to create the atmosphere for which martial law can be declared. And it's just not, I don't think it's going to work. I think Trump is going to win by 20%. I mean, I can't promise it because I don't know how much voter fraud will take place. Will they even allow the Trump supporters to vote?
Right.
I mean, golly, Stalin had a great quote. He said, what's important is who counts the votes. I mean, that's not an exact quote, but you get the idea.
Right.
Anyway, it's a very messy time, very tumultuous time, very tragic time for the United States. And I made a forecast back in 2008 after Lehman Brothers. I said several years from now we're going to have a U.S. government debt default, and the whole world will change. The dollar will go away, and inflation will be imported to the United States, and a lot of very difficult things will take place.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we're right on the doorstep of that. I think we're knocking. But yeah, did you want to tell the viewers how they can contact you again, how they can get a hold of the Hat Trick Letter?
Okay, the website is www.goldenjackass.com.
Okay.
It started in April of 2004. So we have 12 full years. I've got a brilliant group of guys. I call them my colleagues. They're not my staff. They're my colleagues. We exchange ideas. We chew over various things. We try to evaluate various theories and analyses and weigh certain forecasts. We bring to the table information.
Mm-hmm.
And on the main public domain sheet, the main webpage, is a list of public articles and a lot more interviews. Several years ago it was a lot of articles and a few interviews, but I get invited a lot for interviews because of an 80 to 90% correct forecast rate, and some of them are unusual, and most standard economists cannot make unusual forecasts. They're not permitted to. They're paid not to.
Right.
But I'm paid by clients to be as accurate and legitimate and full of integrity as I can, in contrast sharply to the Wall Street economists who don't care about being wrong. They care about being well paid. There are 2 publications per month as part of the Hat Trick Letter.
Mm-hmm.
One is called the Global Money War Report, and the other one is called the Gold and Currency Report. So each month, 2 reports. They read like a magazine, organized by sections. I do a bottom-up approach for writing the reports. I gather in all the stories, all the opinions, all the forecasts, all the analytic points. I organize them by chapter and write them up, and all the miscellaneous things end up in a miscellaneous kind of chapter. And it's been a labor of love, Kai. It's been a lot of work. I'm pretty good about relaxing and recharging my jets. There's a lot to do here in Costa Rica. It's a lot of fun, a lot of attractions.
Oh yeah, it looks beautiful. I definitely want to visit sometime.
It's got a lot to offer. You got to be careful here in certain places. I'm getting much better about staying safe, and it's kind of funny. One way I stay safe is I generally avoid the Americans.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. They always say avoid the Latinos and you'll be safe. I say no, most trouble I've had here is with the Americans. But, I invite people to go to the website, goldjackass.com, look around at the free material, and sign up for the newsletter. And I don't think people will be disappointed. Many people who left have come back, and many people who depend on the free podcasts wish they had signed up earlier after they do sign up. So
Right.
this is a very interesting time, and it's not a safe time to go without solid information.
I agree.
If you rely on the Wall Street Journal and New York Times and Barron's and Newsweek, your Business Week, you're going to miss a lot because they don't talk about the very negative things that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
They're on orders not to.
Right. It's all part of the grand illusion. Alrighty.
Okay.
Well, it was great speaking with you and having you in on my first episode, and I can't wait to have you back on again.
Well, it's a pleasure being on. I wish you luck, Kai.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Hope you have a great day.
Bye now.
Bye-bye, Jim.